Warning! The video you are about to watch will wade into treacherous territory known as the Discourse. You will hear words and phrases that may be upsetting to you, such as visionary Zack Snyder, Warner Brothers, and Martha. You will also hear measured critiques of the works of Mr. Snyder, which goes against the rules of discourse, where love and hate are the only options. Please proceed with caution.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Sticky Floor Friday. No big movies in theaters this week, but we've got one right in your own home. It's Army of the Dead on Netflix. But before we get into A of the D, let's get contextual and talk about the career of the visionary himself, Zack Snyder. Now Snyder, just like someone I discussed recently, Guy Ritchie, got his start as a music video director. His feature debut was in 2004 with a pre-visionary Zack Snyder remaking George A. Romero's classic 1978 movie, Dawn of the Dead. And in a recurring theme throughout his career, Snyder takes on an impossible task. He tries to remake one of the most beloved, influential zombie movies of all time. And it should not have worked. It should have gone straight into the dustbin of history with all the other shoddy 2000s remakes. And yet, it is an unlikely success story. Dawn of the Dead, 2004, is a competently made horror movie, even though it has a green tint that rivals Saw. It lacks the social commentary of Romero's original, but it's really solid and funny, and it's also very nihilistic. There's a zombie baby, which is my second favorite zombie baby in history, just below Dead Alive Baby. It also lacks the visual absurdities trademarks Snyder's become known for, but don't worry, I'll discuss that later. And, the other thing about this one is that it sometimes gets blamed for the fast zombies craze that was happening in the early 2000s. Kind of started with 28 Days Later, but we all know those are not zombies. And while purists are upset about it, it actually works here because Snyder wasn't going for anything more than pure spectacle. The shambling zombies of Dawn of the Dead 1978 helped get across the consumerism is mindless message. But the message in Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead is literally just like, oh my god, there are a lot of zombies and we're trapped in them all. How are we going to escape? And that's it. So, successful first film for Snyder. This led to him directing 300, a green screen gladiator epic that has an otherworldly, photoshoppy quality that mimics the graphic novel style, just like another Frank Miller property, Sin City, that happened the year prior. And that mimicry would follow Snyder as he tried to transpose comic book panels to the big screen for years to come. The success of 300 led to his biggest impossible task yet, Watchmen. This was a story considered unfilmable for years. It was not even a novel in the mainstream public consciousness at the time. It's already an uphill battle. Impossible, as they say. So, the marketing team came up with an extra layer to help sell moviegoers. And that is where we first started hearing Zack Snyder described as a visionary. He was the only one with the vision to pull off this impossible feat. But he didn't quite pull it off. Watchmen has its fans, but it was not hugely successful. And that fact was amplified by the 2019 Watchmen HBO series, which did pull off the impossible by absolutely nailing the story it wanted to tell. I can't believe that show exists and is pretty much perfect. So, the visionary marketing gimmick, it didn't quite work. But look, if someone said, we're going to call you a visionary in all the marketing materials, I'd be like, no, please don't do that. Don't call me a visionary. Seriously though, I would not want that. That is a heavy saddle. Now that the public identifies you as a visionary, there's no turning back. There is intense pressure to deliver on that visionary identity every time. You can't just go make a rom-com. Can you imagine, like, Zack Snyder's When Harry Met Sally? No. You have to make epic event movies for the rest of your life. And so that's what he's been trying to do ever since. And for those who buy the visionary label, Watchmen is a misunderstood masterpiece. I think that said less about his follow-up movies, Legend of the Guardians, The Owls of Ga'Hoole, or, of course, as us Ga'Hoole heads call it, for short, Latgi Tu Ga'Hoo. And there was also Sucker Punch. Neither were successful. But despite that, Snyder still had a strong relationship with Warner Brothers. He made 300, Watchmen, Latgi Tu Ga'Hoo, and Sucker Punch with them. And so when they were looking for someone to take on yet another impossible task, they knew exactly who to call. See, Warner and DC saw what Marvel was accomplishing and wanted to build out their DC universe. An unenviable task considering Marvel already had a 5-year head start. But Snyder, seeing something impossible, said, yeah, that sounds like something I'd like to try. Took the job, and he made Man of Steel. And the reaction was mixed to controversial. A lot of people didn't like Superman killing. A lot of other people are really excited about the fresh take on him. And over the years, I feel like it's grown in its fandom. I'm not a Man of Steel fan, but I don't hate Man of Steel. We already had the Christ-like imagery of Superman in Superman Returns, a movie that we will not talk about. But I didn't connect with Man of Steel's story. And my eyes nearly rolled out of my head when Jonathan Kent just let himself die in a plot contrivance tornado. It made enough money that Warner's was already committed to giving him the DC universe, and so his vision was the DC vision. And it's here that the visionary label really starts to bite back. Visually, Zack Snyder is always striving for shots and techniques that feel epic. Excessive slow motion, speed ramping, hero worship, Christ allegories. But to me, they seem to lack deeper meaning. Feels a lot like style over substance. And Snyder fell further into the visionary trap with Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. He's always got great titles for his movies. This was his most excessive, most indulgent, most absurd, most Martha-y, so far from what Warner Brothers wanted superhero movie that it set in motion years of torment for everyone involved, fans included. The movie was widely panned, it underperformed. Warner's lost faith in the visionary of their own creation. But they were already too far down the path. Justice League was already basically in production. And so Snyder made some concessions. He tried to lighten the tone a little bit, but he also refused to fit it into a 2.5-hour structure. So they were still butting heads. And then personal tragedy struck. It officially took Snyder off Justice League. And it's really heartbreaking to hear that story. But that change was already in the works. At that point, Joss Whedon had already been brought in to oversee some things and be there to assist. And then eventually, when the time was right, the theatrical Justice League is an objectively bad movie. But it is not a Zack Snyder movie. Now, we all know what happens next. AT&T buys Warner Brothers and then forces them to drop $80 million restoring Snyder's version of the movie because they have HBO Max and they need content. And they said, don't we have a movie lying around that people want to see? Yeah, $80 million. Who cares? Which makes me think maybe Mr. AT&T had a son or daughter, we'll call them Lil T, who was just like a really big Zack Snyder fan. And they're like, Daddy, can I have Zack Snyder's Justice League? And Mr. T was like, yeah, let me just buy Warner Brothers real quick and force them to release that. And then after that happened, he was like, okay, well, I don't need this anymore, and immediately dumped it. And yes, the 4-hour Justice League is better than the theatrical Justice League. I mean, this keyboard is better than Justice League. But a 4-hour theatrical version of that movie, after the reception of Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, was literally an impossible feat that even Zack Snyder couldn't overcome. Now, enough digital ink has been spilled on this whole story that I don't need to get into anything else about it. But I will say this. I really don't like seeing Zack Snyder in the press every other day talking about how badly he was treated at Warner Brothers and all the things he wanted to do but he wasn't allowed to do. And now he even seems to be relitigating all of his past movies, including Sucker Punch. He's literally quoted as saying they aren't huge fans of his, which is absurd.
Hey, Zach. Good to see you, man.
Hey.
You all right?
No, it's nothing, bro. Warner Brothers?
Dubba dubba.
Dubba B? Yeah. Well, it turns out they aren't the biggest fans of your old buddy, Zack Snyder.
I'm sorry to hear that, man. But you know what? Making big movies, it's really difficult to find that partner that's willing to see your creative vision through and, put the money up to fund it. That's a lot to ask.
No, I know. I've only made 7 movies with them for a combined budget of $1.2 billion. What do they expect me to do with that? God, they totally hate me.
Right. Fuck off.
If they don't like Zack Snyder, how many movies do they give to people they actually like? Anyway, all this does is stir up the toxic side of his fan base who are abusive and absolute in their anger and rage at anyone they perceive as a critic of Zack Snyder. Here's the thing. All that stuff Zack Snyder's talking about, complaining about Warner Brothers, that's how studios work. That's how they've always worked. You can complain that they're only in it for the money and they've been destroying Snyder's visions through the years, but also they are in it to make money. They're the ones providing the money. They need these multi-billion-dollar IPs to be successful to remain relevant. So you can talk about Snyder's artistic vision, but there has to be a balance here. He can make indie movies where his artistic vision will remain completely intact. But you can't just take some of the biggest names in all of pop culture, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and turn them into dark, pseudo-intellectual meditations on the deconstruction of the superhero myth and expect that to just make it to the screen untouched. I mean, you can try. Snyder certainly did, and he got a lot of what he wanted on the screen, especially with Batman Superman. But you can't complain when you aren't willing to play ball and the studio loses a bunch of money and decides not to continue the relationship. Snyder should be proud of the big swings he took instead of complaining about the at-bats he was never given. It's a miracle that there are 3 Snyder DC movies. But now we've come full circle, and the visionary has finally returned to the genre where he started, zombies. And I couldn't be happier. Army of the Dead is Snyder's first movie since the Justice League Insanity. It's a second zombie movie, but it has no connection to his Dawn of the Dead or Romero's Dawn of the Dead. It's just another in a long line of random unconnected movies with "of the Dead" in the title. Much like any Once Upon a Time in movie. It's been in development since 2007 with Warner Brothers, surprise, surprise, but since they hate his guts, they never made it. Army of the Dead stars Dave Bautista, who has had one of the best wrestling to acting transitions in history. Many have tried. Few have succeeded on the level of a Dwayne Johnson or Dave Bautista. And he's also one of the coolest people I've ever met and had the pleasure of working with. Very cool. Guardians of the Galaxy obviously is what catapulted him into the stratosphere, and it was the perfect role for him, combining his sly sense of humor with his unique size and look. He's even been in a Bond movie, and his role in Blade Runner 2049, it's small, but it shows so much range with just a few minutes of screen time, and it sets up that whole movie. God, I love Blade Runner 2049. With Army of the Dead, Batista is now able to flex all his muscles, literal and figurative, and expand on the depth of acting we saw a glimpse of in Blade Runner. The other notable cast member is Tig Notaro, a comedian who was digitally inserted into the movie after the original actor cast got consequenced. Zack Snyder didn't say how much that cost, but he noted that removing the actor was cheaper than the budget to create a zombie tiger. A digital tiger is worth more than a disgraced comedian. Yeah, it's a sick burn.
That's crossing the line.
Now, Snyder wrote the screenplay along with the writer of John Wick 3, and the plot centers around a group of mercenaries hired by a casino owner to steal the money from their vault before the military destroys it, because it's in Las Vegas, and that's been overrun by zombies. A zombie heist movie. Love that premise. Can't go wrong, right? Now this is more like it. Without the burden of superheroes, supervising studios, and scores of bad press, Snyder has made a fun, funny, unpretentious movie, even if it can't quite stick the landing. But it gathered enough goodwill in the first half to get me through the second. It opens with a reveal of how the zombie outbreak begins, then gets right into a montage of the fall of Vegas. And here, Snyder tosses off a dozen great ideas and visuals, like a soldier parachuting into a horde of zombies and his parachute gets sprayed with blood. A zombie gets torn apart by 50 cal bullets. Vegas landmarks come crashing down into Elvis impersonators. We're also introduced to most of our main characters in this sequence. It's a little confusing, but you kind of pick up that, oh yeah, these are the mercenaries who helped lock down Vegas and they're going to be important to us later. Then we settle in with Scott Ward, played by Batista, to learn about him and the heist. It's like a typical assemble your team, then here's a model and blueprints of the casino, and there's a soldier that's going to be with you with unknown intentions, and also here's a montage of how the heist would go if there were no problems whatsoever, which of course you know, oh, it's not going to go like that at all. It's all predictable, but still pretty fun. But the heart of the movie is Batista's arc with his daughter. It's the anchor that kept me emotionally invested, even though they lose the thread for a while during the action-heavy second half. Of course, that's going to happen. Bautista puts in really strong emotional work from beginning to end. His character is funny, but also carries guilt, and he's motivated to make amends with his daughter. It feels way more personal than anything in Dawn of the Dead, and that all landed for me. Plus, Bautista sometimes wears glasses, which makes him very relatable to me. The rest of the team is fairly generic, save for the fun dynamic of mercenary Vandero and safecracker Dieter, as well as Tig Notaro, who is really funny, especially knowing she was acting against nobody. Hopefully she gets bigger roles out of this, and also, they probably should have just cast her in the first place. And it's also a fun game to find her digitally added to the backgrounds of scenes, like you can kind of see her feet floating, or there's a little bit of a glow around her. Everyone else is basically there as zombie fodder, and even the military guy with unknown intentions ends up having the most cliche military guy intentions. Like, even as I say that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There's actually quite a few cliches like this that span heist and zombie genres, but they don't drag the movie down enough. And sometimes they add a unique twist, like when the safecracker is trying to bypass the vault security, and I'm not going to give that part away, but it's a lot of fun. But the most unique twist here are the zombies themselves. They're more evolved, more alien than regular zombies we've seen. They have a hierarchy and an alpha male, and they think, they plan, they're way more dangerous, and yes, some of them are very fast. But it's a cool logical evolution from the fast zombies of Dawn of the Dead. Now the downside is, Army of the Dead commits the sin of being a zombie movie that is not scary in the least. There aren't even any big jump scares. By seeing so much of the zombies' world and knowing they have a semblance of logical thought and reasoning, takes away a lot of that fear. It swaps out what makes zombies interesting antagonists, they are single-minded and cannot be reasoned with, and, puts in more backstory and lore. Like, you can barter with Army of the Dead zombies, like a swap meet. It's fun. But wait, there's more. They can hibernate, they fall in love, they have babies, they ride horses, and yeah, I did say they can have babies. Because there's another zombie baby in this movie! But I can't rank that one on my list of zombie babies for reasons you have to see for yourself. Also, there is an aforementioned zombie tiger, which is way better than a zombie baby. Does all the zombie world building add up to anything? Well, there are ideas that play into the story. Some of it, though, is just cool for the sake of cool world building and doesn't really serve a greater purpose. Especially the zombie baby and the tiger, unfortunately. I was kind of hoping when the zombie tiger bit somebody, they would turn into a human tiger zombie hybrid. That didn't happen, but hey, maybe in the sequel. And the effects here are hit or miss. There's a ton of CG work, and if this were a horror movie, I would be upset because practical effects are much more tactile, therefore more visceral. But as we've established, this isn't a horror movie, so it's fine. There are some things that don't work here. There's a forced romantic relationship that randomly shows up an hour and 40 minutes into the movie that immediately gets negated minutes later. And then Batista's daughter also has her own motivations for going into the city that are fine, but she ends up disappearing for a good portion and Bautista barely seems to care, which is a little odd. Eventually they bring it back. But also, it has to be said, this movie is so unrealistic. The slot machines pay out in coins. Everybody knows Vegas slot machines don't pay out in coins anymore. Unless you're going to downtown Vegas, but, Fremont Street, don't go there. The last hour devolves into some of Snyder's biggest indulgences, especially slow motion. But it was never egregious enough to take me out of it. And I was really concerned for a couple minutes that he was going to match the nihilism of Dawn of the Dead with the ending. But he lets a couple more people live than in Dawn of the Dead, which is kind of easy to do since no people lived in that one. Overall, Army of the Dead is a welcome return to the zombie genre for Snyder. Thank you for coming back. It's a logical extension of Dawn of the Dead, but the father-daughter story adds much-needed depth and gives the movie a purpose beyond simply survival. It could have benefited from some trims. What a surprise. It's very long. At least it's not 4 hours. And a little more effort could have gone into giving the team more distinct personality. But this felt like Snyder having fun again, free from the pressures of the DC universe, and he ended up with an entertaining zombie heist movie starring Bautista. That sentence alone will tell you whether this is a movie for you. It was for me, and it was for me. WWWWWB. Yeah. Turns out
Come on.